really looking forward to speaking with these beautiful ladies. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at the WWC Conference. I am Sami Micelli. I'm joining you from Mar del Plata, Argentina, beautiful coastal city on the Atlantic side. I'm founder of an eco-conscious brand, The Co. I stand for HER, our mission, Health Education Research, and subsequently also her. I have been in Argentina on an unprecedented, unplanned, extended trip to heal my body. And 1 year later, sorry, 1 second, just my computer just froze.
I think you're okay for me, Sami. I'm not sure if everybody else, but you're coming in clear for me.
We can hear you just fine. It might look weird on your end, but you look and sound great on our end.
Okay, I think I'm good. Okay, yeah. So I have just been on this unprecedented, unplanned trip here to heal my body, heal my spine, but the good news, I am boarding. I'm days away from boarding. I'm so sorry that my dog is being really distracting. I am boarding my flight that I've been waiting for a year later. So you can just imagine pins and needles. I'm flying this Sunday. But I'm really, really excited to be here because moderating the Psychedelics, PTSD and Addiction panel is serendipitous for me. I am so sorry. Really, please. Of course, the dogs are going to do this and the kids are going to do distractions when you're in the middle of this important task. So moderating the Psychedelics, PTSD and Addiction panel feels very in sync with the way that I've been projecting my own healing journey. And if it inspires anyone, I feel like what has been key has been surrounding myself with really talented, knowledgeable practitioners. And if it gives anyone any kind of hope that there are people that you can talk to, there are resources available to us to support our healing and our recovery. This topic is very dear to my heart, very personal, and on a personal and professional level. As a patient, I will admit I am not a medical practitioner. I am not a doctor. However, I am the nucleus to my recovery, and I am my very first advocate for campaigning for my own health. I also, as we're honoring women today, I want to honor my mom. I want to give a shout out to Sandra. She was the first one she's overcome some obstacles in her life and her health, and she was the first one to say, Sammy, you got to be your own doctor, you got to be your own advocate, and surround yourself with the best. And so here we are. Let's meet these talented femmes. We have a chemist, a family physician, a psychotherapist, and an addiction survivor, and a psychedelic advocate. So let's hear from the ladies. Let's do a quick intro. Why don't we go with you first? You're on the top of my screen.
Oh, do you want me to go first? I can go.
Go ahead, Juliana. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. My name is Juliana Mulligan. I work in the Ibogaine treatment community, and I work at the Center for Optimal Living in New York City, running the psychedelic program. I'm also a formerly opioid dependent person who was able to leave that behind with the help of Ibogaine 10 years ago. I had a kind of nightmare treatment where I ended up having 6 cardiac arrests during my treatment because of the negligence of the providers and ending up on a pacemaker for 2 weeks. But the treatment still worked for me, and that experience made me a huge safety advocate for the community. So now I'm super focused on working on the safety and ethical issues in the community, but I also work with people before and after they do Ibogaine, and that's kind of my focus right now. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful, Juliana, thank you. I'm just switching headphones because the other ones I'm having a hard time hearing. I'm having technical issues, I'm sorry. Okay, let's hear from Erica.
Hi, good morning, or good whatever time of day it is for people who are zooming in from other parts of the world. I'm Dr. Erica Zelfand. I'm a licensed family physician, licensed in Oregon, United States. And I practice naturopathic medicine, so I do everything that a conventional MD does, plus a lot of the natural stuff, herbs, nutrition, osseous manipulation, all that jazz. And I specialize in integrative mental health, and that invariably entails knowing about and working with psychedelics as much as I am able. I also educate both the general public and healthcare providers on the importance of including psychedelics in the treatment of both physical and mental health conditions, and for people who are not sick, people who just want to have psychospiritual exploration, and how I believe that that all has a rightful place in our model. So I pre-pandemic, I often presented at conferences and taught at medical schools. And since the pandemic, I've actually created an online course with modules that through, I'm just going to brag for a second, heroic effort, I was able to get approved for continuing medical education and continuing education. And that's called The Science of Psychedelics. My favorite psychedelics include psilocybin, MDMA, and I also work with ketamine. It's legal in the United States, so I've been very fortunate to be able to do that with my patients. And I'm currently in Mexico. This is not a drop screen. This is where I am. I'm like pinching myself, working with and learning about ibogaine and having my mind blown and my heart expanded. So really, really glad to be here. Thanks so much.
I really love the sound of the birds with Salome's meditation, and now with Erica's background. It's incredible. I have some hurts. The sound of the birds definitely win it. All right, let's hear from Robin.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Robin. I am a psychotherapist based out of Toronto currently, and I have a private practice, as well as I'm currently working as a ketamine-assisted psychotherapist at Field Trip Health here in Toronto. I'm so excited to be here and sharing the space with all you brilliant women. So, yeah.
Excited to have you, Robin. I thought it was incredibly serendipitous to find out that Robin is also Canadian Argentinian.
Yes.
That doesn't happen every day.
And you live so close to where my family's at, so it's wonderful to see.
That's also really cool how the synchronicities, even our hosts we met before, and the way it all came together, which is really beautiful, the way our energy synchronized. So it's wonderful to have you. Last but not least, Samantha.
Good morning from Toronto, everyone. Very happy to be here. Very excited. I'm VP of R&D at a company in the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area in Canada, called Pure Minds Biopharma. We're dedicated to finding solutions for preventing cell death in the brain, which is related to a lot of devastating and progressive neurological disorders. So mainly our efforts are focused on harnessing the power of high interest compound classes, such as psychedelics, and also their second generation counterparts. So ultimately, we're developing therapeutics for these neurological disorders, and very excited to be here. We champion both the natural source and synthetic aspect of psychedelics. So it's very nice to be here with people from different backgrounds as well. We have a lot to discuss today. Very excited.
Very excited to hear from each and every single one of you. Also, another Samantha in the room. This is like also very, very synchronizing. I've just been lately surrounded by other Sams and like other me's. Really, really, really awesome. So on the spectrum of psychedelics, you know, we have natural compounds as psilocybin, psilocin. I've been saying it a lot in Spanish, so I've been having to switch my brain around to say ibogaine. Chemical compounds like ketamine, MDMA. And this talk can easily turn into, you know, the debate between natural compounds and synthetic. However, that is not really what we want to do here. What we want to do is recognize that there is a spectrum for patients to lean on, and we do have options. So again, for those wanting to seek recovery. For those that are hearing this for the very first time, if you can imagine the notion of, you know, hallucinogenic or hallucinogens being the medicine that we're using. And as we learn more about the capabilities and how we can lean on them, are the ways that these compounds would serve and would be effective, depending on the circumstances, depending on what is relevant, and what are ways that we can set up patients for success? Like, what are those factors that would facilitate their recovery?
Well, I just want to jump in and say, I think it's super important to support people in creating realistic expectations and dissolving this myth that psychedelics are magical and will fix you overnight and do all the work for you. Most of the hard work with psychedelics comes afterwards, and the kind of sensationalization that's happening right now with psychedelic medicines is setting people up for failure, and it's leaving a lot of people feeling really disappointed and discouraged afterwards. And I see people relapse over the disappointment they feel that Ibogaine didn't work. So I think just helping people to prepare for the work that's coming with different practices ahead of time and prepping them for what might come up. And then supporting people afterwards, like not sending people to an Ibogaine clinic that just treats them and sends them home and never talks to them again, like setting them up with a clinic that's connected with a support staff afterwards, or they provide it or something like that, because really psychedelics are merely door openers and the real tough part comes afterwards.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think, at least in North America, I'm both Canadian and USian. There is often this mentality in medicine where the patient is expected to take a passive role, where they present to a doctor or a shaman and say, "Fix me," and where's the pill or where's the potion that's going to fix me? And it's not so much a matter of taking a passive role, although surrender is a very big part of psychedelic healing and the psychedelic healing process, as it is the medicine catalyzing a kind of work that might not otherwise be accessible to that individual, or that might take them years of kind of dancing around it in therapy or with other modalities to be able to access. So playing, as Juliana said, playing an active role in that healing, leaning in and engaging and working with that medicine. And, to that point, I think what I see happening a lot in the psychedelic world is individuals say, okay, I did Ibogaine, and I hear that ayahuasca is really good for helping integrate Ibogaine experiences. And I hear that doing psilocybin is really good for integrating ayahuasca experiences. And you can't do ayahuasca without doing sananga and combo. And then where does cannabis fit? And it's like, whoa. This is like double, triple, quadruple exposing film, back in the days where we actually shot photos on film. It's like, after a while, you're not going to be able to see what the heck the picture is.
Yes, and would you say that without having that structure and that support system and what we're trying to build here, that there is a risk to harm as a result of not having it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think going back to what Juliana said about setting the right expectations is very critical at this point in time. We've had limited access to study these compounds for many decades. And now that it's coming to the forefront of this new psychedelic renaissance, if you will, I think also informing the public and also keeping everybody, like the general public and those who are interested, educated and informed through conferences like this, and also being very open about the progress of the science as well, is something that I think would greatly help everybody involved. And of course, it's so exciting following on the heels of the cannabis interest for the past couple of years. There's definitely a lot of people who want to learn. And so, from the scientific world, we're all very excited to continue on with the research and trying to understand how these compounds really do interact with the body, what the longer term effects of things like, microdosing might be, and, just keeping everyone informed and interested. That's also what I think would be great to continue.
There's so much to uncover still, and we're just barely hitting, the surface. So absolutely, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and what I might say is, just having this involved in everyday conversation, just exactly what we're talking about here, because you know, as a clinician, as much as we set up expectation here in the clinic and say, you know, this does require a lot of work. This might not be, you know, this beautiful, light, wonderful experience. This might be challenging. This might be, you know, emotionally overwhelming in some instances. And still, so many people, they don't really, I don't know if they don't believe it or if they're not ready to receive that information. And it's not until about halfway through the treatment that they're like, I'm feeling a lot. Like my depression was actually, you know, helping numb what I was feeling. It was keeping certain things at bay. And when that's lifted, you know, we have to be prepared to deal with, okay, well, what's underneath? What is at the root of depression, which is a symptom, I think, of something else in many cases.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just.
You nailed it, Robin. I think that is key, being so clear on the process that it takes to get to a place where you maybe feel like you've improved in your healing and your recovery could potentially be a long one. Sometimes you don't even know what that journey is until you're in it and you're like, oh, okay, now what? And absolutely, this is not a DIY scenario. I would not recommend doing it on your own from someone who has tried to do it on their own and was not as successful. And even just being here and having the conversation. I was incredibly nervous when I came on the call, as you can tell with technology. But now, as we talk about it more, I can find myself in the conversation, and I don't feel this conversation starts here and ends here, right? It's just something that is ongoing. So we're going to dive into some questions, though. I'm curious to know, what is the implication of using cannabis with psychedelics? Is it a positive? Is it a negative? Is it complementary?
I might actually speak to that briefly. You know, I'm at a Field Trip Health here in Toronto, and a lot of our clientele is veterans. And for many of those folks, you know, they're using cannabis as either pain reduction, helping them sleep, helping manage some of their PTSD symptoms. And whereas we ask that clients, you know, not consume cannabis for at least 48 to 72 hours before a ketamine session, at the end of the day, it's about reducing harm and meeting the client where they're at. Because, you know, for some people, I would argue not having any sleep the night before a session can be just as detrimental as consuming cannabis before. So it really is about, you know, meeting them where they're at. Of course, this is ideally what we would like, you know, to not use cannabis before, but if that means you're not going to sleep, if that means you're going to be in pain, if that means, you know, whatever that might mean, then no, we have to, you know, accommodate folks with where they're at. So I think it may vary in different situations, but always meeting, you know, the people where they're at, where they're coming from.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that by saying that there's no one size fits all rule for everything. Like different things work for different people. So I don't think that there's a way for us to say like everyone needs to do it this way and that's the best thing that works. I mean, obviously at a certain point, combining a lot of different psychedelics is going to be risky. But I think that there's really no way to answer this question in like a simple answer. But I'm sure the rest of you have something more specific to say.
Well, I always have something to say, so I'll jump in here. Yeah, as Robin and Juliana mentioned, every body is different. We're all wired a little differently, and there's a reason that there are so many different kinds of medicine out there, right? There's going to be a different, and there are so many different seasons of life. So there's a different medicine for a different person at a different season in their life. That being said, with the work that I do, by the time people come to see me when what they're doing isn't working, I'll say, right? So I don't see the people who are having great successes, because why would they pay me to come to an appointment? For the people who see me, I see cannabis doing a big disservice for a lot of those individuals, because cannabis is such a potent mediator of pain. It is such a potent analgesic, not only of physical pain, but emotional discomfort. And so often by the time somebody comes to see me, let's say somebody comes to see me because they have depression, because they have, let's say, a trauma that they haven't worked through and resolved. cannabis is a beautiful, beautiful way of turning down that pain of that trauma. But they're coming to see me because they're like, well, it's helping, but I don't actually feel like I'm healing the trauma. And like, I can't focus, and like, I'm not really enjoying sex, and I'm kind of spacey, and I sound like, you know, Tom Chong from Cheech and Chong. Like, I don't like this, you know, I want something different. And often what patients report back after they work with psychedelics is, for example, I had one client who told me she went and did ayahuasca, and that the whole first night of her ayahuasca experience, she was purging, which is common, but that the message she was getting was that the ayahuasca spirit was like, I can't work with you because you're enshrouded with the cannabis spirit. And we need to clear this one out because this one has been helping you in a way, but it's been helping you stall. And it's time to clear out that spirit and bring in another spirit that's going to help you advance. Now, does cannabis help other people advance? Absolutely, right? Absolutely.
Yeah, and when we're talking about cannabis, we can talk about the different cannabinoids and how CBD impacts and how THC impacts. It was a question that I just kind of had alarming, but I really like for us to jump into the specifics around psychedelics. So we've talked a little bit about ibogaine, we talked a little bit about psilocybin. Let's talk a little bit about ibogaine. Juliana, I want to hear from you about your story. I think you have a fascinating story that people need to hear.
Yeah, I mean, probably my story sounds really scary. Like if you're just hearing about ibogaine, by the way, it can be done safely. Any medicine in a hospital can kill somebody. So it's like, you need to follow strict safety protocols. And with ibogaine, you really need to do that. And that's what sets iboga different from the rest of the psychedelics, is because anybody can die during the treatment if the protocols aren't followed properly. And so I learned that very intimately in my treatment. I went to a clinic in Guatemala that's no longer existing anymore. They didn't follow the protocols whatsoever. And so I ended up having an adverse cardiotoxic side effect and 6 cardiac arrests and a pacemaker for 2 weeks. My heart is completely normal, by the way. It's temporary. Once the medicine leaves your system, there's no damage. And so, yeah, so that's what happened to me. And that kind of made me hyper focused on clinical safety protocols and just the way a clinic is run and everything that needs to happen. And by the way, it did work for me. I left opioids behind 10 years ago. And I when that happened, I kind of didn't even care about the medical emergency because I felt like I had this huge weight lifted off of me. And I knew immediately that I wanted to work with ibogaine and that I wanted to work to change the way drug users are perceived, treated, and understood. And so that was more important to me in that moment. But later on, my experience became really helpful to me in advising clinics, giving people feedback on how they're working, because honestly, finding a safe and reliable ibogaine clinic is not that easy. And I'm going to put in the chat a guide that myself and another ibogaine provider developed. Her name is Shay. Yeah, her name is Shay Kruger, and we made this guide to finding a safe clinic because honestly, I have maybe 6 clinics that I would ever send anybody to out of like 40 or so in the entire world. And it's really hard to know who's safe and who isn't if you don't know if you're not familiar with the scene. So we made this guide. I just put it in the chat. And yeah, it's a bit of a complicated community, but it's quite a miraculous treatment, especially for opioid users, if given the right preparation and integration support.
Wonderful. Thank you, Juliana, for setting that up and for sharing that. We'll be sharing that with the network and the collective. Let's talk. I want to hear more about other psychedelics. So, what ways? I feel like we haven't really gotten to the nitty gritty of the meat of the conversation, because I feel like what would it be appropriate to use, for example, psilocybin versus ketamine?
Well, I think, one of the biggest factors currently in North America is legality, right? I would love to work with psilocybin more. However, there are limitations to that. So currently ketamine is what is legal. It is a psychedelic substance and it is working also. But I think everyone's going to end up having their preferences. I'm hoping that someday the research is going to show, that maybe certain substances are best for, certain physiologies or certain mental health challenges. That's my hope. I think we're, en route to that. But Yeah, I think location, legality, those are all things that to take into consideration, and what comes with that is the supports that are provided, because sure, you can absolutely do psilocybin by yourself, and I'm not here to preach what is right and what is wrong, but if you're looking to do work around chronic depression, PTSD, addiction, then I do believe that needs to be very well supported, very well facilitated. To what several of the women here have spoken to, having that integration, having that support, that check-in is fundamental to this actually creating change in our lives, because it's not a silver bullet. It's not okay, you take this medicine and that's it. There is a lot of work that is involved in this.
When we say work, are we talking about the ego work?
I think it depends on the language that you want to use. Some people would consider it ego work. Obviously,
What is ego work?
Oh my goodness. I mean, what I would interpret it in within this context is, and how I at least see ego work done within the ketamine space, is creating some space between ourselves and our ego, creating some space between that inner narrative, between our belief system, between these well-worn patterns of behavior or thought, and just stepping back ever so slightly, or a lot, depending on your experience, and not being so enmeshed and identifying with that part of ourselves. That's a very distilled, I think that's
a really beautiful way of describing it. I feel like I just went to therapy. Thank you.
I just want to add, like, what isn't ego work? Like, what part of our healing is not? I mean, because like, we live in a capitalistic, individualistic society where the focus is all on us. And so, of course, the focus of like modern, new agey, psychedelic healing communities is the ego, because that's kind of our biggest issue. But I feel like every type of work we're doing in ourselves is working on the ego. And I just want to mention something else that's connected but slightly different, is that often this community and healing communities in general are so focused on individual healing. It's all about healing for the individual, as if we exist in a vacuum. But if we're going to work on healing, it has to be everybody. It has to be collective healing. And so it's not just about you working on your own trauma. It's how are you supporting other people in working on their issues as well. And that's the real ego work, is if you can forget about just focusing on fixing your own shit, and you can start supporting other people. And that looks like giving back to the indigenous communities whose medicine you're profiting off of whose medicine that you're benefiting off of. Giving back to the communities where you live, just by being like a nice, good, generous person, and not just.
And even at home, you could say even at home, right, with your family, how it's impacting your partner, your kids, your parents, etc.
Yeah, and it's like if you're spending a couple $1,000s on going to get like a fancy psychedelic treatment, then you can figure out how to give back to the community that you're going to, or the community whose traditional thousands of years of work has led to help you with your healing. So just want to mention that real quick.
Mm-hmm. And whose focus, I mean, I'm from what I know, indigenous communities, their focus is on healing community. The role of a shaman is not to heal an individual, it is to heal their entire community. Is not, it is much more of a collectivist endeavor.
Really,
so well said, Juliana.
Yeah, I really like the notion, or the design of healing, where you're at the center of it, and then you have people just radiating from you and then to you and then through themselves, because I feel as you're healing, they're also healing, your healers are healing, because there's an energy exchange taking place every time. And so I think that's also an important piece to add when we say the ego work, which we can probably do a whole talk on. You touched a little bit about those that can afford to travel, or what is the future of medical tourism? Because for me, traveling all the way down to South America was a big leap to take on the tourism side, and I hope to see it grow. How do you see that potentially flourishing? I know that some of us are in Mexico too, and other places.
I don't want to hog this, but I just want to mention that there's a bit of a flavor of reverse colonization going on with medical tourism. where there's tons of privileged white people from the US and Canada and Europe able to go to places like Mexico and South America and spend a ton of money, drastically alter the community with a huge impact. And yes, I want people to have access to these medicines, but I don't think it's really happening in a way that is equitable or is beneficial to the communities that it's happening to. So I just want to say that in the beginning is like, yeah, medical tourism, but like also there's a lot of damage that happens with it too. So I just want to acknowledge that.
I think that is so key that you say that. I think for those that do, like when I say have the opportunity to go travel, not everyone can, and then how is that impacting the local communities? That is huge and very important and really, really dear to my heart. And actually really interested to know how can we make it more accessible, because, you know, accessing psychedelics is not easy. And so how can we make it more accessible for these, you know, adversely impacted communities? Fundraising, lobbying politicians. What are ways that we can drive things more locally?
Well, right now, you know, we're talking about psychedelics. We're here at a psychedelic conference, and, you know, seemingly on every podcast. Psychedelics are wonderful, wonderful healing tools. They are not the only path. And in fact, the majority of people on this planet probably will never take a psychedelic because of access. So you really have to be uniquely situated. Either you need to have the financial resources or you need to know the right people. If you're a housewife in the Midwest and you listen to an episode of the Tim Ferriss podcast and you're convinced that you want to do MDMA assisted psychotherapy to process a core wound or PTSD, good luck finding a provider who's going to do that with you, right? And, you know, I was talking about this, I'm sorry for the car alarm nearby. I was talking about this recently with a friend, and he was like, yeah, but there are ayahuasca circles everywhere. Yeah, not all of us hang out on college campuses or know a guy who knows a guy who has ayahuasca, right? So, and not everyone has the resources to pay someone to watch their kids for a week so they can go to Mexico. So to really have this be not only accessible, but also safe and affordable, needs to become legal. People need to be able to access this on their home turf in an affordable manner, in a way that they are not, A, risking their own safety by doing something underground, or B, risking legal, you know, ramifications. And the way that we're going to have legality in the United States, and I was very involved in the legalization of psilocybin in my home state of Oregon. And I have a lot of enemies because of it. It's not going to look perfect. And in this society, science and research are the religions. We just need to speak the religions of the society to get it in the door. We kind of have to start with medicalization, in my opinion, to get it in the door, just to get it accessible.
Yeah.
And then I think it'll grow from there.
One of the things that has been a big push in South America is auto-cultivation, right? So like growing it yourself. What that has done as a result of just my own experience, and we're going to go into Q&A in just a moment, we've been handing it to people on the street, like just people that are, you know, just they come to you crying, you know, they're just so, you can feel their pain, and so you're like, what can we do to help you, right? Let's give you a little bit of serotonin, activate a little bit of serotonin in your brain. Okay, here you go, a little bit of psilocybin. It's not the way we want it to be, but I've seen a difference, and I think a little bit helps in every way. We're going to go into Q&A. Oh, sorry.
I wanted to jump and say something.
Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
mention something. So, you know, I think, of course, there's constraints like financial resources and legality, but I really, truly believe that the future of access to psychedelics and, you know, derivatives of psychedelics, which can sometimes lead to other breakthroughs as well. I truly think it will be influenced by the amount of work that's done, as Erica said, by the medical practitioners and the research that's done by the science. So, you know, I think in a way, of course, it seems constraining that in this society we live in, everything has to go through a rigid process in order to become socially acceptable. But I do think that, quite ironically, there's some merit to it as well, in the sense that when you take the time to do all this work to understand the specific dosing that can affect a human being in different ways, and the different ways that the medicines can interact with different people, we realize it's a truly personalized process. So to avoid, that issue that happened in cannabis, where we didn't actually get to do as much research in North America as we wanted to because the rush to recreation just made it accessible, we may actually be able to get more insight into how else it can help patients by this lengthy process in North America. So, and there are other countries as well that are providing access through breakthrough designation therapy status. And the more work that we do investigating obscure psychedelics other than the ones that we've talked about today, like DMT, of course, which is in ayahuasca, but even some other analogs of it, we may actually see a more personalized approach that at the end of the day, when you have a practitioner dosing you and working with you, it may be a little bit more targeted to your needs. And that's the future I see with the progress.
I think that's key. I think dosing is a subject in itself that we could probably spend a lot of time discussing.
I also want to say that in the US, we have a pretty terrible medical system, and I'm actually a little bit terrified of bringing psychedelics into this system and having MDMA treatment be $25,000 for a series of 5 sessions or whatever, or having ibogaine treatment done in a really sterile hospital-like environment for $20,000. And I'm kind of excited that California, DC, and Oregon are just decriminalizing so that our communities can organize and do it ourselves, and not according to the abusive, patriarchal, white supremacist, oppressive medical system that we have in this country that has traumatized many, many people. And the way, maybe in Canada it's going to be different, but the way that it works in the US is newly designated breakthrough treatments are not affordable to most people. And so I kind of see decriminalization as the better route to kind of skirt around our abusive, oppressive system.
I totally agree with that, Juliana. And, we're seeing this, for example, in ketamine, which is not a plant medicine or even an indigenous medicine. And I'm really glad that Robin is here to represent Field Trip Health, because a lot of places are, in my opinion, doing ketamine all wrong. They're like, here, come in this, room without a window where the AC is blasting, and we're not going to offer you a blanket, and we have fluorescent lights, and we're going to hook you up to an IV of ketamine and come back in an hour. And it's like, we're not going to play any music for you. And it's like, well, how, you could go so much deeper with that. And something that I really like about the law that we just passed in Oregon, it won't take effect for 2 years because the state has to figure out how the heck to administer it, is you don't have to be a licensed healthcare provider to be a facilitator of the psilocybin therapy, which I think is really, really beautiful and really, really important work. The trouble with decrim, as opposed to straight out legalization, is, in Oregon, for example, we decriminalized all drugs, meaning you can possess them in small amounts. It's still not legal to sell them. And it's still not legal for me to hang a shingle and say, hey, even though I'm thoroughly trained, including by MAPS in MDMA-assisted psychotherapy and psilocybin therapy, and come and I can treat you for not $10,000, I still can't do that on US soil as of this moment. And that's really frustrating. And I totally hear your point. It should not have to just be in hospitals with a patriarchal system. I completely agree.
Yeah, it's the state we're in at the moment, right? Where we're trying to transition into what we'd like to see as the best world for us to work in and operate in, and yet there's steps towards it. So I do see the debate between the legal systems and the political systems, and how we can really influence that change in the process that we're in. But we have some questions in the Q&A. Speaking of bridges, so that's where my mind went, is how do we bridge these objectives, these desires to build the system that supports access to psychedelics as medicine. So the question is, what are the bridges to integrating psychedelic-assisted therapy into an established medical framework? It's kind of essentially what we're touching base on.
Yeah, so Russell, thank you for your question, and I encourage all the other ladies to answer after I provide mine. But, I'm going to sound like a broken record, of course, but I really wish we had access to these therapies, prior to legalization for patients. But at the end of the day, developing data that, governments can look at and say, okay, well, this shows some evidence of success, and, turning to some of the pioneers in the space like Field Trip Health and a lot of other companies that are really trying to show evidence that these things work, whether it be a natural source of a psychedelic in a specific formulation, or whether it be a synthetic, psychedelic substance. As long as there is some kind of movement towards establishing a data set. In the New England Journal of Medicine recently, Dr. Carhart Harris, he led a study that showed some benefit of using psilocybin over the common SSRI as an antidepressant. It's a slow moving process, unfortunately, but I think the bridges that we can develop to actually get this into an established medical framework really require collaboration. So, I'm really passionate about enabling like a positive partnership between all of these companies and all of these nonprofit organizations to help each other more quickly establish the work that they need, because there are a lot of gaps too that are preventing the work from getting done more quickly. But, we have to be positive. Look at all the interest, we can harness it and get everybody on board by providing them with the right tools, like research chemicals, like, accessing their labs to actually continue the work. I think Field Trip is doing a great job trying to integrate their therapies already into the Ontario healthcare system. And I think, to lead and to also advise others on how to do that, we're all here to help each other. But, Russell, the one thing that I'm really upset about, and I'm sure everybody else is that things move slowly when it comes to scientific and clinical investigation. But, the more we work together and the more we emphasize it, I think the faster it'll go. We'll kind of catalyze each other's progress on the way.
Yeah, 100%. I think collaboration, communication, keeping the conversation going, really driving the conversation with those that maybe have currently the ability to make change, designing it as we go. So other questions come up. So where do we begin? If you're a patient and you're just like, I'm struggling with this and I want to get help and I feel like psychedelics is the way to go, where do we begin?
I think it really depends on what medicine that you're interested in, because it really, like if you're looking for a ketamine clinic, it's a really specific criteria. Ibogaine is a whole different thing. And I think, Robin, you can probably answer this better, but I would say if you're interested in ketamine treatment, to go somewhere that offers preparation and integration support, or at least refers you somewhere, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we've all said it, I'm a broken record here, but preparation, integration, doing the work, that is so needed if we really want to see the true efficacy of this medicine. But I also, I do want to be realistic in that I know that not everybody is going to want to come to a clinic. Not everybody, whether that's accessibility, whether that's preference. So, for individuals who, are going to be taking these medicines perhaps by themselves, again, from a harm reduction lens, there are many integrative psychotherapists, okay? There are entire listservs that have therapists that are trained in talking about your psychedelic experience, helping you integrate that, helping you, ground from that if need be. So there are resources out there for you, even if you're not necessarily, wanting to or able to come to a clinic like this or otherwise. So.
I'd like to hop in here and say, there's this saying in homeopathy, the potency you have is the potency you need, because the medicines come in so many different potencies. And sometimes it's like the psychedelic you can access might be the psychedelic that you need. That might be the psychedelic that has found you for a reason. That being said, I do consultations online with people across the world who go, I want to do psychedelics, which one? And then we chat about what that person's past experiences are, what their health goals are, what their health is like, what other medications they're on, what they are and are not comfortable doing, and come up with a customized plan of which medicine at what dose and what context. So like I said before, you know, to everything, there's a season. There's a season for the different, not only the different medicines, but different dose ranges, right? And different settings. Some people are going to feel a lot more comfortable doing a medicine in a place that feels medicalized. Some people are going to freak out. Some people want to do it, you know, around a campfire. And everyone's going to have their own resonance.
There you go. There you have it. It's customized. It's relative. It's unique. It's about having the conversation and reach out to Erica. You can reach out to any one of us. I believe we'd all be open to having more combos with more people. Absolutely. I would love to hear more from you. I think, do we have time for one more question?
Yes, we do, yes.
All right. One of the questions that comes up from here is, what kind of trauma does psychedelics help with? What about childhood trauma and sexual trauma?
Yeah, I mean, any of these medicines could potentially help with any of these traumas, but again, there's no guarantees of anything, and it depends on how you set up, like we've been saying, it depends on how you prepare and how you integrate. It depends on your support network. And another important thing is, depends on the community that you surround yourself afterwards, especially with Ibogaine for people who are coming out of really destructive relationships with drugs. A huge thing is who you surround yourself with, what kind of a support network you have, what your daily life is like also, because it's not just about, oh, I just need to fix this trauma, you know, this little thing. No, it's like about what you do in your daily life for forever afterwards. It's like how you set up your day, who you interact with. It's an ongoing process. I mean, I got off opiates 10 years ago, but I'm still unraveling. There's always another layer to unravel. So what you surround yourself with is incredibly important as well.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah, I just want to say that for trauma and PTSD, my favorite molecule is MDMA. It's a really, really beautiful medicine that it's almost like anesthesia for surgery. It just allows you to go right for the thing that needs to get healed. And the tricky thing with PTSD is there's a defense mechanism that develops that can be very difficult to do therapy, unmedicated therapy with these individuals, because as you start to get near the wound, the person's defenses flare up and they feel triggered, and that may be experienced in and of itself as another trauma. So you may actually make somebody worse if you don't know what you're doing. And in the right context with a trained facilitator, MDMA can relax that response by virtue of its effects at the amygdala and help the person actually, instead of go like this, kind of lean in and be like, yeah, let's talk about that thing. And there can certainly be tears and snot and yelling and punching of pillows. I'm not saying it's a blissful experience, but it's possible. And something that I really like about MDMA, some people say, oh, MDMA is not even a psychedelic because it doesn't, you know, you don't have any visuals with it. And that's actually why it may be good for people with trauma. Individuals with trauma, if you catapult them into outer space, like on DMT, they might flip the heck out. Or if you give them something like ayahuasca, where they have these very, very vivid images that they can't control, that may be just too much voltage for them.
Too much stimuli.
It could be way too much. Yeah. So MDMA is, that gets my vote.
We can have a whole other conversation about MDMA. I'm really I want to talk more about that. Absolutely. And a thought that also comes up around like masking the pain versus working through the pain. Juliana, your last thought or your last piece about that, it just reminded me of, you know, when we say, oh, I'm going to take clonazepam for anxiety, and I feel like that's just like, oh, it's Band-Aid covered up, where, you know, in this case with psychedelics, you are definitely needing to continue the work, and it's a lifelong journey, and it's something that doesn't stop. You know, it's a new door that opens, and then you just keep opening more doors.
Also, I just want to say that, like, it's important to remember that more is not better with psychedelics. Like, there's a lot of these proponents of these like 7-gram mushroom doses, and you had a bad experience. You just like people have told me, you just need to take more ayahuasca, or you didn't do it with the right shaman, or you didn't, like, if you have a bad experience with a substance, it's not because something is wrong with you. It's because your body is tuning into what's right for you and what's not. And sometimes for people, maybe only microdosing works. Sometimes psychedelics aren't the right thing. There's a lot of different practices also. And just because there's all this excitement around psychedelics does not necessarily mean you need to make it work for you. So I really want to encourage people to listen to their bodies before they listen to a shaman or some other hierarchical leader in the community tell you what you need to do with your body.
That's huge. Listening to your body is the first thing you want to do, and then have that conversation, have that feedback conversation with yourself and then with your practitioner, so that there's a response on the other end that you can mirror. Yes. I'm just getting like to really get into the nitty gritty. I want to continue to have this conversation all day because I think we have so much to uncover. We're just barely, this is just the cherry sprinkle. So if we don't have any other questions, Sam, some comments here. I'm just trying to add a couple things. Russell, how are we doing with time? And
thank you very much, Sammy.
I think we're ready to wrap up.
Yes, that was brilliant.
So let's just keep the convo going. I'm flying back to Canada in like 3 days, or Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So and I think I'm landing on a tiny house that is going to be the very first HER space. So we'll be doing more education opportunities there. I would love for us to continue to have this conversation. So thank you, ladies, so much for being here and sharing the wealth of knowledge. Just like so much talent, I feel so much talent in the circle. So like give the microphone back to Russell, and looking forward to connecting with more of you as we go through our journey.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you to all you wonderful, badass women. I'm honored to be on a panel with you all. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, Juliana.